And the other thing that, as you were talking, the thing that came to my mind is the difference between when we started and where we are is that we had a real clear idea of what our vision is. We were all excited about, we're bringing 4 congregations together. We're going to build a new building. We're going to write. Everybody had an idea of what that looked like.
And that's what they put their
and now we're at that. Well, we're mostly there. And so the point of this conversation, these conversations, because we won't be done today, but the point of these conversations is to help us think about, so what is that new vision that everybody can get a hold of? And not everybody did the same thing, but what's that new big vision? This is what God wants. God brought us to this point so that from here we can go to that. That's what this conversation is I'm hoping is going to lead us to. All right. So with that in mind, want to do some, what I hope is quick background. And I want to introduce a notion called Congregational Love Language, because I think it will help us grab on it'll give us some handles for how we get around what we want to get to. Now, I apologize because I'm pretty sure that this is going to feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. So as I fly through this stuff, if you have a question or you don't understand, or you think that this is flat out wrong, please ask. Okay, but otherwise I'm gonna go pretty quick, because I'm hoping this will be a short introduction. And the other thing is that we'll be recording this, so, and gonna put that into a video, this section. So if you want a second shot at it at a later date, or there's folk we need to share it with, we'll be in a position where we can do that. All right. So this comes from a guy, ideas from put together by Michael Beck. And I just threw these up here because the thing about Michael Beck, we're going to hear from him later today, is that he is a United Methodist. So he knows the very peculiar arrangements that we have as United Methodists. And he also understands what this can look like in rural churches, right? So this is not some guy who's part of a 10,000 member church in a city of 2.4 million, right? This is a guy who has done these things in an area not too dissimilar from ours. So let's lay his idea out here quickly with some biblical framework. All right, but I have this against you, that you have abandoned the love that you had at first, from Revelations 2:4. So here's our biblical framework. Working from the book of Revelation, chapter 1 is this introduction to that John, who is on the Isle of Patmos, has been exiled there. He has received this vision with instructions to write it down. And then in chapter 2, it starts out with Jesus is talking about sending messages to a series of churches in Asia Minor, those 7 churches that are on the screen there. And this gives us a framework for how do we think about revitalizing or remissioning. Revitalizing sometimes has the sense of let's go back to what was. That's not really useful for us, because time only runs in one direction. So if the best we can hope for is to go back to what was, we will always be we'll always be leaving stuff on the table, right? Because we can't go back to what was. So remissioning, this gives us a framework for that. So all of these letters, they have the same kind of formula. They start out with to the angel at. Literally, that word angelos is messenger. So one way to think about those is that they're addressed to a particular pastor and their congregation, the one who's bringing the message of God to that congregation and the people of that church. And then it starts with a thus saith. So it's a direct word from Jesus through this letter, and then talks about who the church is in words that are drawn from the first chapter. Then we get into a celebration of fruit. What's good and wonderful? What do we love about your congregation? And then, except for two congregations, it gets to, but I have this against you, right? You've got this going on and it's good, but here's where you need to look at. Here's what you need to look at. And then there's a warning about what happens if you don't. And then the promise of reward. And then there's a statement of he who has ears. And that gives us a broader application for the church across time. Right. So that's our biblical framework, that Jesus starts out with these messages to the churches. And so this is a healthy project for us to be on, to be looking at who are we, what are we doing well, where do we need to get better, what hope does that bring when we get better, what's the promises, and we can draw that not only for us but for Christ's church in general. All right, so that's the biblical background for this project that we're working on. Okay, so is Jesus knocking on our front door in the same way that he knocked on the door at Ephesus? Is he asking us to rekindle the love that we had at first? How do we find our passion for ministry again? How do we get our congregations excited to serve? How do we do those things? And this notion of the 5 congregational love languages, I think, gives us a way to begin to do that. Now, this notion is based on a book by Gary Chapman called The 5 Love Languages, How to Express Heartfelt Commitment to Your Mate. Is anybody familiar with that?
I'm familiar with Gary Chapman.
Okay.
And he has a lot of 5 love languages.
Yes.
With,
right.
Specific ones.
Okay. All right. So let me hit quickly on this notion that Chapman has. So Chapman's thesis is that his notion is that everybody has a primary love language. In other words, a way that we hear people say, I love you, and they're not all the same. So some folks hear I love you with words of affirmation, right? They know that they're loved because people say, I love you, that was really kind, thank you, I really appreciate when you, right? And that's how people feel that they have been loved. Okay, next one is acts of service. So they know that they're loved because dinner's always on the table, the laundry is always folded, the grass is always mowed, the car is warmed up before you have to go, right? All of those little tiny things that we do. And for some people, that's the way that they really hear that somebody loves them. Okay, another one is receiving gifts. Now, again, would say that Chapman has looked across cultures, right? So this isn't just American, this is Africa and South America, right? Just across cultures worldwide, these things happen. All right, so some people know that you love them because you get gifts, because you give them gifts, right? And it doesn't have to be great big things. I brought you a flower, right? I sent you a box of chocolates to work just because, Right. And for some people, that's how they know that they're loved. Another is quality time. The way that you know that you're loved is because you spend time with me. You take time out of your busy schedule and you are here. And the busier you are, the more important that quality time becomes. All right. And the last one is physical touch. Now, in a relationship, it is about sex, but it's about more than that, right? It's about hugs. It's about, pat on the head. It's those simple caresses. Get a kiss before you go out the door, right? It's all of those things. So Chapman's idea is that everybody has a primary love language. That is how they understand what it means to be loved. All right. And so Michael Beck and his wife, Jill, are co-pastors. And he talks a little bit about they feel like their ministry is to the churches that nobody else wants and nobody else sees. But as he's talking about these 5 love languages, they find it useful. And for instance, Michael says that Jill's primary love language is quality time. And for Michael, it's physical touch. So it's not that the others aren't important, but those are the things that you really, really know. So, so in this example, Michael could send Jill 100 birthday cards, could buy her a $40,000 new car for her birthday, and it would be, okay, thank you. But if he spends time with her, that's when she knows. That's when she knows that he loves her. Okay, so that's the difference. And so part of this idea is that if we know what our partner's primary love language is, then we can make sure that they hear the I love you. Because what we tend to do is the thing that we receive as love. So if your primary love language is kind words, then you will always be saying to your partner, I love you, thank you, I appreciate that. If that's not their primary, but if their primary love language is quality time, you can say, thank you, I love you, that was wonderful, really appreciate that. But if you never get around to hanging out together, they still feel like you may not love them. Right? So that's why knowing this can be really helpful, because you can be literally screaming, I love you with every ounce of your being, but if you're not speaking it in the language that they hear it in, they may not get it. They may not get it. All right. So I told you all of that. And so this is, they have a blended family, 8 kids between them, and God bless them all. All right. So here, I told you that so we could talk about this. Is there because I think he's right. I think that congregations have ways that they hear I love you that are not all the same. And that sets up this, right? So if the congregation is loved by God, congregation is also loved by a pastor. And Beck talks about the relationship between the pastor and the congregation as an arranged marriage, particularly in the United Methodist Church, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I'm stuck with that one. Okay, what are we gonna do? Right. So if the pastor is speaking one love language and the congregation primarily operates out of a different one, right? We're doing it, you know. And then the other thing that's really important about that, and this is where I think this becomes really useful, is that our community has a love language. And so as a congregation, we may be thinking, oh, we're doing all kinds of great things for the community, but if we're not loving them the way they hear love, then we're a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Right? So we're going to start talking about congregational love languages. So Beck thinks it works out this way. Going down the same primary love languages, how they show up in a congregation is a proclamation-centered congregation, an outreach-centered congregation, a generosity-centered congregation, a fellowship-centered congregation, or a healing-centered congregation. Right? That's how those 5 languages come out in a group. So when he's talking about proclamation-centered, this is a congregation that the way they know they're loved is that there is great quality teaching and preaching. Right? That's the thing that is most important to them. So if they have a great pastor they have a pastor who's a great teaching pastor or a great preaching pastor, that's what they want. And that's what they're looking for. That's how they know that the pastor really cares about them. Okay, another one is outreach center. This is one where the thing that the congregation that holds the congregation together is we serve in the community. So this is the church that has the food pantry and the clothes closet, and they support missionaries overseas, and well, no, not so much that. They go into the city and do things, right? That's that congregation. All right. Next one is generosity centered. These are the folks who take the resources that they have and invest them in the ministry. So they're always looking for, what can we give to? Or what missionaries can we give to? What projects can we give to? What are the things that we can help? Right? They're not really doing anything, but they are super generous with the gifts that God has given to them. Now that can be a little church. A colleague told me a story about a church he served where it was a little church. He was serving a 3-point charge at the time. And they got excited about supporting missionaries through the Board of Global Ministries. And at that point, the congregation or the board was saying that the target for supporting a missionary was $1 per member. Right. So the pastor thought, well, they'll pick a missionary and they'll give, to support, and they can probably get to this $1 per member figure. They picked 5. And then after a while, the board said, well, actually what we really need is $5 per member. So then they had 6.
Say that again. I lost something there.
Okay, so you were supposed to get, so this congregation was worshiping 20, maybe their attendance, that would typically make their membership around 100. So $100 per month per missionary.
Okay.
Pastor thought they could do that.
Right.
They picked 5. So 5 missionaries, so $500. Then it went up, then it went up to $5 per member. And so they had 6 missionaries. He thought they'd have to cut back some, right? And his leaders were saying things like, we don't know what to do with all the money they're giving us. That's a congregation, or that's a generosity-centered congregation. Fellowship-centered congregation. This is a congregation that what they love most of all is to be together, right? We love being together in worship. We love being together around the table. We love being together what we love most about the projects we do is that we are together, that we love being in community. Okay. And the last one, healing centered. This kind of can go one of 2 ways. In some congregations, this really goes to towards the Pentecostal. We're raising hands, everybody gets a hug, where people get slain in the spirit. It goes towards that whole those people speaking in tongues. There's healings, right? People are anointed and they fall out on they're slain in the spirit and fall down in the right. So sometimes it goes that way. Other congregations who have this, it's still huggy-feely kind of congregation, but they're more into AA or NA. They've got all kinds of recovery groups. They're looking for that kind of thing, right? So does that give you sort of a super quick, I'm trying not to knock you off the boat with the fire hose. So here's our question. So what do you think is the primary love language of Countryside? Remember, the notion is that these are like spiritual gifts, right? It's not that you don't have any of the other, but there's one that is the primary. This is the big one. What do you think is the big one, right? We do have the other ones, but what's the big one that defines us, that if you screw that up, everybody is mad?
But are they the same options as we talked about for a
Right.
relationship? Okay, so.
Right. So
No.
right. So it would be, yeah, the proclamation is affirming words. Yeah, gifts is outreach would be acts of service. Fellowship is quality time, and then healing is touch, physical touch. Yeah. So of those, which do you think is the primary? Because yes, we do all of those in some sense. Yes, sir.
I think proclamation, the preaching, inspiring people to do these things, everything else would follow from that. So I think proclamation, the preacher, has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, but he's
Is that
asking
what's most
our
important
church?
here?
What are we
What is
doing?
our church?
What is our
Where's
strong
our
point?
church
Right.
congregation?
What is it for Countryside? What's the thing that we care most about?
Oh, okay.
Which one do we?
I think that fellowship would probably be at the top of my list, but I
Mhm.
think a lot of the other ones are very.
Oh, absolutely.
close to me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that, I'm not sure whether the end of this is becoming, you can't be all things to all people. Should you?
Actually, that kind of goes to the other.
Can be.
Yeah.
Should
But-
be.
It's hard.
Different parts.
No, you can't please
Right.
everyone.
Everybody wants everybody, their love language, who you're
Uh-huh.
communicating
Mhm.
with could
Right.
be different.
Right.
So
Right.
you almost have
Right.
to.
Well,
Yeah.
where it's going to end up is we have to be conversant in other people's love languages, but we have to know what ours is. So I hear a couple votes for fellowship. Does that feel like that's the one that's at the very top? Right? It's not saying that we don't do the others, but for Countryside,
What
Is
is it?
fellowship-
What are we known for?
no. What is it that we, us here, what is the thing that when we have a great experience of a great experience of preaching that we go, yes, that's why I'm at Countryside. We have a great experience of fellowship. We go, yep, that's why we're here. We have a great, what is the thing that when that happens, we go, yes, this is why I love Countryside.
I feel
Fellowship?
I feel like fellowship because
Mhm.
we have a pizza sale.
I'd
We
say
all-
outreach then.
Go ahead.
But see, there's a
Sorry.
difference though, because that
Yeah.
could be yours.
No, but
What I
I'm
was
saying when
going
she
to,
says
what I was
that.
going to say was
Mhm.
like,
Sorry.
that's all right.
I'm going to go relight it. Keep talking.
Like when we have a pizza sale, we enjoy being here with each other and we laugh and we share what's going on in our lives and everything. When we have the rummage sale, we kid around, look at this, we get to know each other. We get to know what's going on in our lives, in our community. When we have any of these get-togethers where we're working on a project, but it feels more like fellowship and pulling together. Even Sunday after church, when we come down, sit down and have a cup of coffee. Hey, what's going on, with your family?
Mhm.
Oh, I haven't seen you in a while.
Mhm.
And that's what draws me, I think, is that the support
Mhm.
in my experience with the people in our churches for a long time, the support when you're going through all the different things that you go through in life, when you know that these people are here and they are supportive.
And I think Countryside is known for hospitality. I feel that would fall under fellowship.
Yeah.
I think that's what people recognize.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, even
I mean-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's what I was just saying when we were saying, what are we known for? Yes, we're known for the hospitality, so we got the love language. That's what I was trying to get at.
That's how we express it. Yeah. But for us, I'm thinking, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, picking up on this fellowship idea, you were saying, we'd love to get together down here, that's fine.
Mhm.
But even before that, every Sunday when people come into church, I've been in churches where you walk in, and it's very silent, solemn, not here, not at all. And that really bothered me when we have these midweek Lent services, because of any time of year, when there ought to be an opportunity to come into a solemn service, that ought to be it. But even there, you walk in and people are chit-chatting, and finally somebody comes up and hits that time check. I just I don't like that.
Mhm.
I don't like, I mean, that's the one time
For
when
the
you
right.
meditate,
Mhm.
because it's Lent, you're supposed to do some self-serving,
Mhm.
examination, stuff like that,
Yep.
but you don't have it.
Yep.
No,
Yep.
Well, we do
Okay.
during
So
the service.
again, hold on to that. Hold on to that, Ron.
good.
So what I'm hearing is that we're kind of talking ourselves into going, yeah, I think probably fellowship is our most, I hear fellowship is I think the primary language. When we think about what's the most important thing we want out of a meeting, we want everybody there. We want everybody there. What has COVID hurt us the most? People aren't here. They're not here. Right. Because our primary love language is we want to be together. We want to, and I think that's really, really important.
It is in life. We find that even going into gatherings, when people started going in without the mask and you weren't shying away from everybody else on the aisle, I mean, people, they greet you and they smile. Isn't it a beautiful day? I mean, it's just awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And this is a biblical thing, right? The Greek word that we use is koinonia. And it's about the connection that we have. I mean, Paul talks about the church as the family, about the body of Christ, that we are all, Jesus, how many times did Jesus pray? We be one. In the same way that the Father and the Son are one. I mean, this is a biblical thing. Right? So it's not wrong for us to be a fellowship-centered church, right? That's a strength. And when you go back to the list of things that we love about Countryside, let me get that slide up quick. Yeah. Yeah, when we get that up, right? What's it? Caring, family, welcome, love, right?
Generosity, courage.
Right. It's not that we don't have the other ones, but the ones at the top of the list are fellowship. And that's where COVID hurt us the most. And I mean hurt in terms of hurt our feelings, made us feel not loved.
Well, and that's where COVID took a lot of people.
Absolutely.
The mental illness
Mhm.
that advanced
Right.
because
Mhm.
people were alone. The elderly who had to be alone. And that was the key issue,
Mhm.
other than the disease. That
Mhm.
was the key issue. And that's when
Mhm.
people in the mental
Mhm.
health profession,
Right.
my daughter's a
Mhm.
counselor and she's
Mhm.
like, she's got a great business now because, her
Right.
clients
Right.
so increased
Right.
during this,
Yeah.
all the way down to our very young people.
Right. So the strengths of this are that it scratches that itch about the fear that folk have about being alone, right? That's one of the things that we celebrate. When you're here, you're part of a family, right? Bill Lindbergh,
Yeah.
right? This isn't a congregation. This is a church family.
And you
Right,
walk
that's who we
away
are.
from here
Right.
knowing
Mhm.
that, and it's a comfort.
Yep. Yep. So here's one of the reasons why knowing this is important. So in the lead up to coming, I came to the conclusion that we were a proclamation-centered congregation.
I think that ranks up there high.
Oh, I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. I'm saying that as I was preparing, as we were coming together, that was the sense I had. Now, I didn't have this language at that point, but what I thought I had heard from the superintendent, from SPRC, was we love music, we love worship. So, well, now that we're in COVID and we can't be here, I'm going to do the very, 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 very best worship service I can pull off because I thought that was the thing that was the most important. And so that's what you got, including a 40-hour or including a 30-minute sermon, because that's what I thought you all heard as this is a pastor who cares about us and wants the best for us. Man, was I shocked when I discovered that no, that's not the thing. So that's why knowing this, between a pastor and a congregation, is so important, because I'm shouting I love you in what I think is the way that you would know it. And there are people going, our pastor hates us. Our pastor hates us. Literally. There were folks who thought that this new pastor didn't care about us at all. There were folks who thought I sat on the couch and drank beer all week. I guess, I don't know. Okay, so this is where knowing what our primary language is really, really huge. It really matters.
How do you know that? You said the district superintendent and various other people told you. How do you know that's not true? when you come into a church,
Yeah.
you feel you've made mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you avoid that?
Part of it is, this is relatively new stuff. The book hasn't hit the book stands yet, right? So, so it's really kind of new. So we don't have this language. But so when we do the profiles, that's what they're trying to find out.
And at that time, the SPRC, we wrote all these things of what we were looking for. And we said that to him. So there's document that said, yeah. Well, the SPRC team at that time felt that was what we
most needed.
stood for.
Right, right.
But you know what, when we
Because
started
our
out with.
focus was on a pastor. What were we looking for in a pastor?
Right,
Nobody asked, what does Countryside as a community church
right,
hold
What do
at
we-
value? We
Right.
missed that mark, Jeff.
right, right.
We missed
And because
not saying
it's,
that.
yeah, because it's not on the form.
What do we throw?
Nobody else asked,
No.
That
because we
wasn't
didn't
the
know to ask,
question.
because we didn't know to ask.
If I were to answer that question,
Yeah.
I would say we value high quality worship. Always high quality worship,
Mhm.
where everybody
Mm-hmm,
leaves inspired.
mm-hmm. As long as it doesn't go over an hour.
Well, I don't care
I-
about that, but that.
Well, but I mean,
to
that's,
me
and
is-
that's another piece of how I know that fellowship is the bigger thing, because shut up and let us go downstairs where we can be with each other.
Yeah.
My thing is though, like, every week, the candles are lit. Every
Mhm.
week, like, nobody's fooling around with the doohickeys. They are ready.
Mhm.
Everything is prepared.
Mhm.
We know we're given instruction
That's
on.
not so true, because I lit them
on
Mhm.
for
commu-
Steve last week.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Yeah, but that's the bar.
That's
Yeah.
right.
High quality,
Right.
always constant,
Mhm.
high quality.
And you know what, when we started with JP, I would say we were more proclamation at that point, because the way he presented things, he was really effective. Now, he had his things,
Well,
you know,
sure.
everybody does.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But
that's
boy,
the
he was-
diversity. Can't we, as a diverse group
Mhm.
in Countryside,
Mhm.
incorporate all these pieces of love?
Yeah,
And
we're
all
not
of
saying
these-
you can't.
Can't we
Right,
integrate them
right.
all?
We
So
do.
that I can
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right.
do both.
because,
Wait, let me
Or
ask,
all
when you
five.
say high quality, are you talking more formality?
I'm
When
like,
you say the lighting of the candles and the this and the that and are you saying more formality?
not necessarily. I just like, and I'm
Mhm.
not being critical or trying to step on anybody's toes, although that does seem to be the thing here.
it can happen.
Hey, we're family. We're family. You say that stuff to family. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jill.
There was a baby baptized.
Mm-hmm.
I do not know the parents' names. I do not know the godparents' names. I only know the baby's name because you asked,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't really hear the response. That kind of thing.
Is fellowship.
And that makes that family feel like we care about them. You know, this is Ron and Jill Imdorf. This is their
Mhm.
baby girl, Allison. They are members of Countryside Church. That's what I want to hear. I want to know who those people are. So when they come down after church, I can say to them, we're so glad you're here. Welcome. We're glad. I hope you'll come back as your baby gets big, whatever.
Mhm.
Make a connection there. I still don't know really who those people were.
Because as far as I go, doesn't the church have an obligation, once we baptize somebody, we're
Mhm.
responsible for their spiritual well-being?
We
throughout
say
life?
that.
Right,
We
we say
make that
that.
commitment.
Right.
How can we do that?
Right, how can we do that? That's
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's the
Okay.
kind of thing I mean. I
Okay.
want to know what's going on. I want to
Right.
know in a worship service, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
That should have been in the bulletin.
And
Yes, it
that's,
should have been in the bulletin.
and that's fellowship. That's fellowship
That's what I was
center.
gonna say.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think, and believe me, I'm not hung up on COVID, because while I took it very seriously, at the
Mhm.
same time, the farm had to operate
Sure.
every day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think one of the very difficult things for the church, for the minister, but for all ministers and all churches with the Methodist rotation, the timing could not have been worse. Like,
Yeah.
I can understand,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can understand the superintendent giving their insight. I gotta be candid, the two that I was involved with, didn't advance us very
I have
far,
to agree with you, Keith. I mean, when he said the superintendent, I
but
right out, I was like,
yes,
how do they know?
but,
They don't get to know us.
but the pastor, if he was able to interact with the congregation
From the beginning.
and the congregation interacting with him, absolutely, what SPRC gives to him is important. What the superintendent provides should be important, but I agree with you, Sue. I don't see how that
They don't know us.
that plays out. We miss the interaction. Now, I will say this, and I have heard other people say that. I think perhaps the first was in the cars, but your sermons are very good sermons, in my opinion, and they're always very Bible-based. There is not a question in my mind, and I'll be frank, because I considered them all friends. Mark would always have something tied to the Bible, but having said that, Mark also had a perception of the social agenda in his, and there were some that bothered him. Now, me, we had all kinds of things. I'm looking at you, Jill. I can still remember the last meeting he was at was a trustee meeting. And he and I had totally different views of how you're going to feed the world. But what I would say for Mark, what I have to say for Mark and Phyllis was they were very open to other opinions. I had them in the combine, I had them out in the tomato field. But this I'll never forget, because we've had problems weeding forever. And there was a discussion about, I believe, the prayer garden, and we've got to make it smaller. And I'll never forget, and I'm not thinking I don't have anybody else sitting there, and I said, well, we can take care of that because we can start using Roundup next month because Mark's gone. Well, Mark took it very well, but Jill reacted. I wasn't thinking about Jill. I knew that Mark would take it well, but Pastor, that was comments that I had as far as the content of your sermons, and that's coming in those first days in the automobile.
I agree with you, because I remember, I thought it was absolutely awful that they changed pastors independent for everybody.
Oh, they are.
And I remember people saying, "How's your new pastor?" And I say, he seems like a really nice man, and he gives a good sermon. But that's all I
We
know.
can't get to know.
And that's what we all say. I think we all say.
My wife wrote a letter to the bishop
Okay.
at the time, protesting the idea of changing anybody's baptism. She never got a response, of course.
Yeah.
There
Well,
were multiple churches. I spoke with a bunch of churches
Yeah.
at conference who went through the same experience.
because the option is, either you say to pastors, "Oh, you can't retire this year," which I don't think we can.
Right.
Or you say to the churches that the pastors retire from, you're just not going to have a pastor,
Good luck. Right. there you
right?
go.
And none of those are really options we want to live with. That's how we ended up. Anyway, so that was I didn't want to get to that so much so I could confess where I thought some of our things, and I have to say I don't think that everybody here hates me. That's yeah. So don't read too much into that. But I think it's important for us to. I'm really thinking that this is helpful language for us to think about in a couple of different ways. So I want to move to a couple of things, and then we've got to take a break.
But this is a good thing to add to when you're doing it now.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh
So
yeah.
like you're saying, so that
Right.
we know what kind of pastor you might be and what kind of church
Mhm.
we're thinking we are.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? When you're looking for
Yeah.
that new
Yeah.
minister, new whatever, like you're saying,
Mhm.
now you have something to outline it in.
Mhm.
What kind of a church
Mhm.
am I going to and who am I gonna
Right.
fit it with?
Right.
Profile is
Yeah.
more fellowship.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, and part of this is, again, COVID did us no favors in that, and I'm still finding out things that I would have expected to know in the first 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
And
Yeah,
but
well, and that's
anyway.
it, because in the transition,
yeah,
we didn't think of things that you needed to know either.
right,
It was
right.
just not fair. I mean, it wasn't a good situation for us or you.
No, it wasn't good for anybody.
And we could just get to know you, but you were supposed to be expected to,
Mhm,
get
mhm.
to know people without seeing them or.
Right, right.
How are you gonna?
Yeah.
It was a challenge all the way around.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
everybody has a different love language.
Oh, yeah.
I hear different.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's important to me.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that would, I mean, it's
Right.
important, but not at the top of my list.
Exactly,
That's what I
exactly.
mean. That's
Right.
why it's too
That's
hard
what
to
the
say.
congregation needs to come to and
Mhm.
maybe be made aware of is,
Right,
not everybody's going to appreciate the same things
right,
in the
Right.
pulpit.
right,
And-
right. Yeah.
That would be, if
And it
we're gonna
needs
do
to
a
be
survey, that would be a
acceptable.
good survey to see.
Yeah, yeah.
It would be interesting, wouldn't
To
it?
see how people
Yeah.
answer, because like you're saying,
Yeah.
there's only 10 of us here, whatever
Right,
yeah,
here.
right.
And we're all thinking.
And we all
some-
have different
And we're
ideas.
thinking
though.
something different,
Mhm.
but if you
Mhm.
knew what the majority was, you
Right.
could feed off
Right.
of.
Yeah.
Start with
Right.
that, like
Right.
you're saying, I think we're a
Yeah.
combination of everything, but
Right.
Well, I wonder if that
Yeah.
would, beg the question if you
Mhm.
put it in the bullet.
Yeah.
List, what's,
yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
list your
Yeah.
priorities, then you
One
want
to
to
five.
yeah.
this church.
Yeah,
What are
that's
you
a good
looking
idea.
for?
For
Yeah.
you, what
Yeah.
is your
Right.
option
I
1 to
think that would be
5?
Because
Mhm.
maybe we're aiming further on.
But at the same time, you're not wanting to tell people, well, we're not going to take care of this.
Yeah, you're right,
need.
exactly,
Right.
So
exactly.
we almost have to
Right.
have different groups sort of deal with different,
Mhm.
with
It would be
it.
interesting
Right.
to
Yeah,
find out.
like-
Still
Right.
important.
It
Yeah,
would be
like,
interesting
yeah.
to find out, and they don't have to sign their
Mhm.
name, but it
Uh-huh.
would just be interesting to
It
get
would
a
be.
synopsis
yeah,
It
it
would
would
be.
be.
of what the top three are.
And then make sure that
Mhm.
we're dealing with those things the best
Mhm.
we can.
Mhm.
The others we wouldn't have to focus as much on, but
Mhm.
make sure that we deal with those things in some way,
Mhm.
you know?
And
Yeah.
and a comment that I made many times
Mhm.
is that the church is going to be successful. It has to be pastor.
Mhm, mhm.
That's no.
No, no, no.
No offense, Pastor.
No, none taken. Hey,
You gotta be.
Yeah.
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 Before when the
Yeah.
Oh.
JP, I think.
Oh, no. Yeah, I could not agree more.
No.
Yep. My, yep.
Are you?
Yeah.
do you need some love time?
Yeah, my first appointment, I'm there, I just started seminary, I'm in my early 20s. And one of the pillars of the church, he was the treasurer at the biggest of the churches. He puts his arm around me and says, Jim, we are so glad you're here, but we were here before you got here and we'll be here after you go. And I remember Harry telling me that, and that's been really helpful to me, right? It's Yeah, this is not my church. This is our church. I'm completely invested in here, but anything that is dependent on me 100% is going to be in trouble.
Right, right, right.
So,
Or anyone.
well, right, and
Or
anyone,
anyone.
Just that,
Yeah.
in that role, that's it.
right. But so that's part of how I think about how I do what I do is anything that depends 100% on me is a boatload of trouble. Because, unless the Lord returns, the superintendent's going to call at some point. I hope that's a long time from now. I really do. But
They always rip them out.
anyway,
We just get them trained. and we take-
that's right. That's right. I keep saying it takes 7 to 12 years to train a pastor correctly, and then and then you don't get that right. Yeah. So, okay. Let's jump forward just a little bit here. So as we're beginning to think about now, how do we apply this now that we have a kind of sense of who we are at Countryside? How does that work out in the particulars we're thinking about how we think about these 5 love languages in connection with our community? So Edmund Friedman in his book, Failure of Nerve, writes, when a relationship system is imaginatively gridlocked, it cannot get free simply by more thinking about the problem. Conceptually stuck systems cannot become unstuck simply by trying harder. For fundamental reorientation to occur, that spirit of adventure which optimizes serendipity and which enables new perceptions beyond the control of our thinking processes must happen first. This is the equally true regarding families, institutions, whole nations, and entire civilizations. So he goes on to say, is this imaginative gridlock can take place in sick and declining relationship systems. It can take place in healthy ones too. The ability to imagine different possibilities is seemingly lost. You can tell you're in such a system when we are always trying harder, looking for answers rather than looking at the question differently, and engaging in either or thinking that creates false dichotomies. Yeah. So, yeah, doing the same thing over and over again, just a little harder, because it's what we've always done, right? And that's the sentence in the church, because we've always done it that way.
That's the definition of insanity.
Well, yeah, it is.
Expecting a different.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Right. So the good news is that if we're feeling like we're just rehashing the same things over and over and over again, we're not alone. There's some help there. And then Freeman goes on to suggest that one of the major criteria for judging the anxiety level of a community is its capacity to be playful. And then he thinks thinking about these 5 love languages is a way to help us. Beck argues that this 5 love languages idea can help us to explore and to make sure that we maintain a capacity to be playful.
So Friedman is agreeing with Beck's.
Well,
Is that-
actually, Beck read Friedman and went, "Oh yeah, that's right."
Oh, so we're vice versa. Okay.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the word adventure.
Mhm.
When we were
Yeah.
putting the churches together, we
That's
were
adventure.
in
Mhm.
an adventure. It was all unknown. We were going
Right.
into things that we
Right.
had never done before.
Yeah.
That was exciting to
I was gonna say,
everyone.
We
Mhm.
lost that excitement.
And see,
Mhm.
Now it's just like,
well, we got
Yeah.
to the top of the
We're just
mountain
gonna
and you're
float
sort of like,
along.
oh yeah,
Mhm.
you know.
yeah.
Well, we had a really well-defined vision, and we did that.
And now what?
Right, and that's what these conversations are about.
Well, we
that
can't
we need to
make
know.
the mistake of believing that the church is the building.
Oh, no.
The church is the people, so.
Right.
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 That's what we talked about.
Mhm.
We still should have a vision of building the church.
Right. Right. Right.
But see, I think where we need to go though, okay, our goal was to get the church. But the reason we wanted the church was to give us the ability to do so much more.
Right.
And
Ge-
that happened.
And that happened. Now
Mhm.
we're in that
Mhm.
quandary of, okay,
Mhm.
now what
Yep.
is the next
Yep.
thing to
Yep.
do?
Yep. Well,
But-
and I think it's fair to ask the question, has our concern about paying off the mortgage taken the place of our vision,
It has. It has.
right?
Because some are so concerned about that. They're not worried about, oh, wait, do we have the money for the electricity? Do we
Mhm.
have, are we doing what God wants us to do? Or are we just,
Mhm.
the only thing we can concentrate on is paying off the mortgage?
Mhm.
Instead of trusting that God will help
Mhm.
us
Yeah.
pay it off.
Right.
But we need to reach out and do more.
Right.
Not more money necessarily, but more
Mhm.
pulling
Right.
people toward God.
Yeah, and so where I think we are is we need to get to the point where we can say, and this is the more that we're after now. Right? We want this congregation to look like this, or we want this congregation to be about that. With the same clarity that we talked about, we need to merge these four churches. And then we need to build a space for us to gather together. Right? We have to talk about this. We have to get to the point where the next step is as clear and well-defined in our heads as merging and building the building was. That I think is where we are.